some words with the Connecticut bench on her way back.
There are nights in sports where one player carries so much weight that you almost forget there are 9 other people on the court. September 6, 2024 was one of those nights. Caitlin Clark walked into Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis with history on the line, a defense that had no intention of making it easy, and a referee crew that seemed determined to make things even harder. What unfolded over 40 minutes of basketball was messy, physical, controversial, and at times absolutely breathtaking. The kind of game that reminds you why people tune in, why arenas sell out, and why Caitlin Clark has become the most talked about player in women's basketball. The Indiana Fever lost the game, but what Clark did inside it was something nobody in that building or watching from home was going to forget anytime soon. Coming in, Clark was already operating in historic territory. She had spent the entire 2024 rookie season stacking records like most players stack games, one after another, each one bigger than the last. She had already shattered the Fever's single-season assists record, become the first rookie in league history to record multiple triple-doubles, and was closing in on the WNBA single-season three-point record held by Sabrina Ionescu. But on this particular Friday night, the milestone on the table was the Fever's own franchise record for most three-pointers made in a single season. Kelsey Mitchell had set that bar at 102. Clark came in needing just one more three to push past it, and with 107 three-pointers on the season already to her name after the game ended, she made sure that record wasn't going to survive the night, but she was also just 11 shy of breaking the WNBA's all-time single-season three-point record. The scoreboard said 99-88 Minnesota by the final buzzer. The record books told a different story entirely. From the opening tip, Clark was locked in. There was an edge to her game that felt personal, like she had a point to make and about 400 reasons to make it. She came out sharp with her vision already dialed up, scanning the floor and threading passes to cutting teammates before defenders could rotate. The kind of unselfishness that frustrated opposing scouts because Clark was so dangerous as a shooter that every pass she made with defenders collapsing on her was essentially a layup handed to a wide open teammate. Aaliyah Boston was one of the beneficiaries early, with Clark finding her on the move with a pass that cut through traffic like it had GPS. Kelsey Mitchell was another, getting easy catch and shoot looks off Clark, drawing defensive attention. That's the thing about playing with Clark that doesn't always show up in the stat sheet. She makes everyone else's job so much easier just by existing on the floor, because teams have to dedicate so much attention to stopping her that someone is always open somewhere. Then she did what she came to do. Clark caught the ball, rose up from three-point range in the first quarter, and drained it with the kind of casual authority that made it look like she was practicing alone in an empty gym. That shot made her the Indiana Fever's all-time single-season three-point leader. The crowd in Indianapolis erupted. Mitchell's record was gone. There was a brief moment of acknowledgement. Clark didn't need to perform for the cameras. The moment spoke for itself, and then the game moved on, because that's how Clark operates. She wasn't there to take a bow, she was there to win. The Minnesota Lynx, though, had other ideas. They came into this game as the hottest team in the Western Conference, sitting at 24-9 before tip-off, and playing with the kind of collective confidence that comes from months of building chemistry. Nafisa Collier was their engine, a physical, technically sound forward who could score from anywhere, defend every position, and had been one of the most dominant players in the league all season. The Lynx were not going to lie down because Clark wanted a historic night. If anything, the stakes seemed to sharpen their focus. They came in with a game plan, they executed it, and when it mattered most in the third quarter, they turned the screws in a way the Fever simply couldn't answer. The Fever actually looked sharp through the opening quarter. Clark was distributing well and scoring when she needed to, but the real surprise was how balanced the Indiana offense appeared. Kelsey Mitchell was unconscious from three-point range, draining back-to-back shots that had nothing but net and absolutely nothing of luck attached to them. Mitchell caught one off a screen and knocked it down without hesitation. Then she came right back down the floor, used another screen to shake her defender, and hit a scoop in the paint that had the bench on their feet. Clark followed that up by pulling her defender into the paint with a drive, drawing the foul, and stepping to the line with ice in her veins, knocking down both free throws like the moment carried zero pressure. On the defensive end, Lexi Lexi Hull was making life difficult for the Lynx's perimeter players, and Aaliyah Boston was doing the dirty work in the paint that doesn't make highlight reels but absolutely wins basketball games. Offensive rebounds, box outs, position defense, and the occasional bully bucket that reminded everyone she was one of the best young bigs in the entire league. By the end of the first quarter, Indiana had built an 8-point lead, 27-19, and it felt like the Fever were firmly in control of the tempo and the tone. But here's where the night started to get complicated. The referees had already gotten involved in the game in ways that were raising eyebrows in Indianapolis. Technical fouls were being called. Whistles were breaking up momentum at the worst possible moments. Clark, never one to suffer what she sees as questionable officiating in silence, was pushing back, and those reactions were piling up. By the time the Lynx started mounting their second quarter comeback, Clark was already sitting on a dangerous number of technicals for the season, and another one was going to result in an automatic suspension. It was a subplot that kept threatening to become the main event. You could feel the tension every time a whistle blew and Clark turned toward the official. The crowd held its breath, because a Caitlin Clark suspension would have been the kind of news that buried the actual game. The Lynx found their rhythm in the second quarter. Collier was too physical for anyone the Fever threw at her, and Minnesota's supporting cast started making shots that in the first quarter had been missing. Courtney Williams was creating off the dribble and finishing in traffic. Hines Allen was aggressive at the rim, and Minnesota's defense started generating turnovers, something that had been rare in the first quarter, which turned into easy transition buckets on the other end. The Lynx clawed their way back into the game and slashed Indiana's comfortable lead all the way down to 3 points. The arena that had been buzzing with energy 10 minutes earlier was getting anxious. The Fever were holding on, not dominating, and the shift in momentum was unmistakable. Clark responded the way only she can. With two defenders crowding her and the paint packed with bodies, she did not hesitate. She pulled up from deep, not just at the 3-point line, but from a distance that would have made most players think twice. And it went in clean. The crowd roared. Then she did it again. 2 quick threes from Clark in the second quarter that pushed the lead back to a manageable margin and sent the message to Minnesota that every time they thought they'd figured something out, she was going to pull something new out of the bag. It wasn't just the shooting that was impressive, it was the decision making. Clark wasn't forcing shots because the moment called for her to be the hero. She was reading the defense, identifying when they had overcommitted, and punishing them in real time with the shot that no defender in women's basketball has yet found a reliable answer for. Her shooting range is so extreme that guarding her in the conventional sense is essentially impossible. You either give her room and she scores, or you chase her out to 30 feet and she drives by you. There is no comfortable middle ground. The first half ended with Indiana leading 50-45. A 5-point cushion heading into the locker room sounds manageable, but anyone watching could feel that the Lynx had momentum and were running plays that were creating genuine problems for the Fever defense. Minnesota's pace had picked up in the final minutes of the second quarter, and their ball movement was finding gaps that Indiana's rotations were a half-second slow to close. It felt like a halftime lead that was more fragile than the number suggested. The third quarter confirmed every bit of that fragility, and then some. The Lynx came out of the locker room like they had been shown exactly where Indiana was vulnerable and had spent 15 minutes drawing up ways to exploit it. They scored the opening 9 points of the third quarter without Indiana getting a single field goal, flipping the 5-point lead into a 4-point deficit in what felt like about 90 seconds. The crowd went quiet. Collier was the catalyst. Physical drives to the rim, contact drawing plays at the basket, and the kind of brute force scoring that the Fever had no immediate answer for. She scored 9 of Minnesota's first 20 points in the third quarter alone. Clark tried to answer with a shot in the paint, but Collier swatted it away at the rim, and Williams hit a jumper on the other end to make the lead 70-60. That blocked shot felt like a turning point. The Fever suddenly looked like a team that was chasing, and Minnesota looked like a team that had taken over. Clark had seen enough. She went to the bench for a stretch while Indiana tried to stabilize, and in her absence, the Fever were barely keeping the game from spiraling completely out of reach. Maisha Hines Allen was carving up Indiana's defense on drives and post-up plays, and the Fever's offense without Clark on the floor had no real creator. No one who could change a possession from a standard play into something that required the defense to genuinely scramble. Indiana made just 3 field goals in the entire third quarter. 3 against a team that was not supposed to be historically efficient on defense, but was that night, at least in those 12 minutes. By the end of the third quarter, Indiana was down 12 points, and the game had the feel feel of a closing act rather than a competition still in the balance. The fourth quarter was where the story got interesting again. The Fever had clearly made adjustments. They came out spacing the floor in ways they had not been doing in the third quarter, not pulling Minnesota's defense out to the perimeter, creating driving lanes that had been clogged for the previous 12 minutes, and trusting Caitlin Clark to be the conductor. Kelsey Mitchell broke the scoring drought first, driving and finishing a floater over the help defense that got Indiana on the board and shifted the energy back just slightly. Not long after, Clark caught Minnesota's defense napping in the corner and drained a three that had the crowd back on its feet. The Fever had a pulse. The comeback was on. Clark started finding her teammates with the kind of precision that makes coaches fall in love with her game. She was running the offense like a point guard who had studied every tendency of every Minnesota defender on the floor. She fed Aaliyah Boston in the post with a pass that put Boston in a position to go to work with her back to the basket, and Boston made the Lynx pay with a strong move and the bucket. She used Kelsey Mitchell's off-ball movement as a weapon, getting her teammate open for looks that Mitchell, who had been brilliant all night, had no trouble converting. The Fever were within one possession. Gainbridge Fieldhouse was as loud as it had been all night, and then Clark herself took over. With the game hanging in the balance and the crowd at a full roar, Clark got herself free off a beautifully executed off-ball movement sequence, set her feet, and launched a three that had the whole arena leaning forward. It dropped. All net. The crowd completely lost its mind. Indiana was within a single point. Clark wasn't done. On the very next possession, she used a screen from Aaliyah Boston to draw the Lynx's defense out, waited for them to commit to the blitz, and then reversed the ball back to Boston under the basket for a bully bucket that put Indiana ahead for the first time since the third quarter explosion. 2 consecutive plays by Clark, one as a scorer, one as a playmaker, had swung the game completely. This is what makes her genuinely different from almost every player in the league. She can beat you in so many ways at the same moment that you can never fully commit to stopping just one of them, but the Lynx were not going to let a lead that size disappear without a fight. Bridget Carlton, who had been relatively quiet for stretches of the game, suddenly caught fire in the final 4 minutes. She hit 1 3 from the corner, then another from the top of the key, then grabbed an offensive rebound off a missed attempt and kicked it back out to Courtney Williams, who stepped in and hit another 3. 3 3-pointers from Carlton and company in the span of about 3 minutes, and the lead was back to double digits. Minnesota had answered every Indiana run with a haymaker of their own, and when Clark drove to the rim looking to keep the comeback alive, the contact came and no whistle followed. The Lynx grabbed the loose ball and pushed the pace the other way, turning a potential Fever possession into 2 easy points and finishing off any realistic hope of a comeback. The final score was 99-88 Minnesota. Clark finished with 25 points, 5 made 3-pointers, and 8 assists in a loss at 22 years old, coming off a triple-double in her previous game. The franchise 3-point record sitting comfortably in her name, 11 threes away from the all-time WNBA single-season record, on a team that had gone from lottery irrelevance to playoff contenders largely because she showed up and refused to let them be anything less. The box score was a loss, yes, but everything surrounding it was a statement. After the game, the conversation wasn't really about the final score. It was about what Clark had shown throughout 40 minutes of basketball against the best team in the Western Conference. That she was capable of moments of brilliance that transcended the result, that she was still building towards something larger, and that the WNBA record she was chasing was going to fall. She was averaging over 19 points and more than 8 assists per game in her rookie season. She was making history every few weeks in a league that had never seen a rookie do what she was doing. Gainbridge Fieldhouse was selling out regularly for the first time in years, and road arenas were following suit. Fever games were pulling television ratings figures that the league hadn't seen in over 2 decades. The Indiana Fever hadn't been this relevant nationally since Tamika Catchings was dragging them to finals appearances a decade earlier, but this felt different, broader, louder, reaching into audiences that the league had never fully cracked. Casual sports fans who had never watched a WNBA game were tuning in because Caitlin Clark was doing things on a basketball court that made it feel criminal to look away. that effect was built on a foundation of complete offensive ability, and the three-point record she set against Minnesota was the loudest proof of it, making 107 threes in a single season as a rookie in a league where defenses had studied her tendencies since the day she was drafted was not a product of luck or volume shooting. It was the result of extraordinary range, extraordinary shot selection, and an extraordinary ability to find pockets in the defense that other players simply do not see. The loss stung. You could see it on her face in the fourth quarter when calls didn't go the Fever's way and the deficit crept back up. Clark doesn't mask frustration well, and that competitiveness is part of what makes her compelling to watch. She cares too much to be detached, and the emotion that runs through her game is genuine in a way that connects with people, but the frustration never curdled into giving up. Right up to the final possession, she was looking for the play that could change things. That's the detail that doesn't always make the highlights. She's still hunting even when the math is difficult, still creative, still threatening, still forcing the defense to make decisions until the clock runs out. The Fever would regroup the following weekend. The season still had games remaining and a playoff spot was within reach. But this Friday night in Indianapolis became one of the defining images of Clark's remarkable rookie campaign. A night when she made franchise history with a single three-pointer, put on a masterclass of offensive versatility against a top 5 defense, and did it all while losing a game that the box score will record as a straightforward Minnesota victory. Records and results don't always tell the same story. On this night, September 6, 2024, they were practically in different universes. The Lynx went home with 2 points in the standings. Caitlin Clark went home with a record that had her name on it permanently. Do you think the Fever can get their revenge if these two teams meet in the playoffs? Drop your prediction in the comments below.